Today, we're diving into the story of one of the most important consoles in video game history, the rise and fall of the legendary Atari 2600. But before we explore that, let's go back to the beginning, to a time when video games were just finding their place in the world. In 1972, Atari released Pong, a simple yet incredibly addictive game that took arcades by storm. Pong wasn't the first video game ever made, but it was the first one to achieve massive commercial success. Imagine walking into an arcade back then, the sound of quarters dropping, the hum of excitement, as players lined up to compete in this basic game of virtual tennis. For many, Pong was their first introduction to what would soon become a global obsession: video games. Atari didn't just make a popular game, they set the stage for the entire gaming industry, and their next big idea would bring video games into our living rooms. After the success of Pong, Atari had a bigger vision. Why limit video games to arcades when they could be enjoyed at home? In 1977, they introduced the Atari 2600, and this marked the beginning of a new era. Before the Atari 2600, consoles were limited. They came with built-in games that couldn't be changed. But the 2600 introduced something revolutionary: swappable cartridges. Suddenly, you didn't just own one game, you owned a system that could play many games. This innovation opened the floodgates for creativity. Now developers could design games of all kinds, and players could build their own collections. It wasn't long before iconic titles like Space Invaders, Asteroids, and Pitfall became household names. Imagine this. It's the late 70s, and you're sitting in front of your TV, joystick in hand, playing Space Invaders, the excitement of shooting down alien ships while hearing those simple but unforgettable sound effects. These were groundbreaking experiences that Atari delivered straight to your living room. And it wasn't just for kids. Entire families were gathering around to play. The Atari 2600 became more than just a gaming console. It became a cultural phenomenon. But with great success came great pressure. By the early 1980s, the market was overflowing with games, many of them rushed and poorly made. One of the most notorious examples is E.T. the Extraterrestrial, a game Atari rushed to market in just 5 weeks to capitalize on the popularity of the film. The result was disastrous. E.T. is often cited as one of the worst video games ever made, and it became a symbol of Atari's decline. The backlash was swift. Millions of unsold copies sat in warehouses and on store shelves. The damage was so severe that Atari allegedly buried a massive amount of ET cartridges in a landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico. For decades, this was considered an urban legend, until it was confirmed in 2014.
Atari games unearthed at a New Mexico landfill are now up for sale.
Beaten up cartridges on eBay are going for hundreds of dollars a piece.
When a team of archaeologists and filmmakers unearthed thousands of copies of the game in that very landfill. This discovery not only confirmed the rumors, but also served as a reminder of the great crash Atari experienced. NET didn't single-handedly cause Atari's downfall, but it became the most visible symbol of a company in freefall.
Many of the companies who a year earlier were so desperate to get into the business of making games were now just as desperate to distance themselves from it. February 1984, Mattel announces it will sell Intellivision off for $20 million. In March 1984, Odyssey closes its doors. And finally, on July 2nd, 1984, Warner Communications agrees to sell Atari.
The 1983 video game crash sent shockwaves through the industry. But as with any collapse, there was a rebirth on the horizon. While Atari struggled to recover, new players entered the scene. In 1985, Nintendo launched the NES, which many credit with saving the video game industry from complete ruin. The rise of Nintendo brought a new level of quality control to the industry, setting standards that are still followed today. And even decades later, the nostalgia for the Atari 2600 is still alive. In modern movies and TV shows, the 2600 often appears as a symbol of a simpler time, a reminder of gaming's early days. We've seen it in films like Ready Player One, where the final challenge revolves around playing an Atari 2600 game, and in TV shows like Stranger Things, where the console appears as part of the kids' everyday lives. The presence of the Atari 2600 in pop culture highlights how deeply it's ingrained in our collective memory. From collector's items to retro gaming conventions, this console's influence hasn't faded. Today, many game developers, inspired by Atari's innovations, even pay tribute to it by referencing its games or aesthetics in modern titles. The 2600's impact is still being felt, both in the gaming world and beyond. Atari's rise and fall is a powerful reminder of the risks and rewards of innovation. They weren't just a company, they were pioneers who changed the way we interact with technology and entertainment. And even though their time at the top was brief, the impact they left on the video game industry is lasting. Atari 2600 will forever be remembered as the console that brought video games into our homes and sparked the imagination of generations. It's a symbol of both the triumphs and challenges of early gaming history, and its story continues to inspire gamers and developers alike. Atari 2600, a true icon in the history of video games.
System made by Atari.